secure channel is just outrageous. This is kind of Defense Intel 101. Don't give up your secrets.
Don't give up your secrets on a non-classified chat platform. That was Democratic Senator Mark Warner of Virginia reacting to the bombshell report that top officials in the Trump administration texted war plans to a journalist in a group chat. The question is, will there be any repercussions for this disclosure of classified information? Also ahead, the latest on the legal fight over the Trump administration's deportation flights to El Salvador. The question is, how long can the DOJ stonewall the courts? Plus, we'll have an update on diplomatic talks between U.S. and Russian officials about a ceasefire proposal in the Black Sea. The question is, will Vladimir Putin actually uphold any agreement? It's way too early for this. Good morning and welcome to Way Too Early, the show whose group chat is definitely classified. Feel free to add me to any top secret signal chats, though. I'm Vitali on this Tuesday, March 25th, and we will start with the news. We begin with the stunning sharing of sensitive military operations by top Trump administration officials through a group chat on the Signal app. The editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, reported yesterday that National Security Advisor Mike Waltz inadvertently added him earlier this month to a group chat about military strikes on Yemeni Houthis. According to Goldberg, the group included Vice President J.D. Vance, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and others. You see him on the screen. It's a ton of top Trump administration officials. Goldberg described his initial skepticism, wondering if the unsolicited outreach was part of a disinformation campaign. Goldberg wrote that Hegseth, on Saturday, March 15th, texted the group the war plan 2 hours before the strikes, which included precise information about weapons packages, targets, and timing. Goldberg left the group after he concluded it was almost certainly real. He's a better man than I would have stayed. Privacy and tech experts say Signal's encrypted messaging is more secure than conventional texting, but it can still be hacked, and it's not cleared for classified information sharing. Several Defense Department officials told the New York Times they were shocked Hegseth had put American war plans into commercial chat groups. They said having this type of conversation in a Signal chat itself could be a violation of the Espionage Act, a law covering the handling of sensitive information. Now, when asked about that piece in The Atlantic, President Trump claimed he had no knowledge about the leaked strike plans.
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business. I think it's not much of a magazine, but I know nothing about it. You're saying that they had what?
They were using Signal to coordinate on sensitive materials and
having to do with what? Having to do with what? What were they talking about?
With the Houthis.
The Houthis? You mean the attack on the Houthis? Right. Well, it couldn't have been very effective because the attack was very effective. I can tell you that. I don't know anything about it. You're telling me about it for the first time.
You're saying they had what? A source tells NBC News the president met with National Security Advisor Mike Waltz later in the day. The White House press secretary then issued a statement that reads in part, President Trump continues to have the utmost confidence in his national security team, including NSA Mike Waltz. This comes amid speculation about Waltz's future with the administration. White House officials telling Politico that President Trump will make that decision over the next few days as he watches the coverage of the embarrassing episode. Meanwhile, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is denying that he and other administration officials used this group chat to discuss war plans.
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again.
Why were those details shared on Signal, and how did you learn that a journalist was privy to the targets, the types of weapons used?
I've heard I was characterized. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that.
Notice that at no point does the defense secretary say this chat is fake. It doesn't exist. And it's worth noting the White House National Security Council confirmed that the group text, quote, appears to be authentic. Now, Democrats were quick to slam the Signal chat that appeared to share that classified military information. Last night, 14 Senate Democrats, led by Tim Kaine of Virginia, sent a letter to the Trump administration demanding answers about how this could have happened in the first place. The letter also claims members of the group chat directly violated the Presidential Records Act through their participation. Some of these messages were set to delete after a week or another set time period. Here's what some other Democrats are saying.
There should absolutely be a congressional investigation so that we can understand what happened, why did it happen, and how do we prevent this type of national security breach from ever happening again. This is reckless, irresponsible, and dangerous. We were promised that Donald Trump was going to hire the very best. It's all phony. And understand, this whole Trump administration is filled with lackeys and incompetent cronies.
Look, it's utterly horrifying, right? I mean, it is not hard for competent nation states, think Russia, China, a few others, to get into, Signal, to actually capture the information on Signal. So let's assume that the people on this Signal chat were probably the top targets for some of our global enemies. It is by the grace of God that one of those enemies didn't alert the Houthis in advance so that they could reconfigure their anti-aircraft assets. And had they done that, we would be looking at dead pilots right now. That's how serious what this administration did is. And again, it is by the grace of God that we don't have dead pilots and failed missions.
Just first, your reaction when you read this story in The Atlantic. How alarmed were you?
Holy crap. I mean, when this level of detail is being shared on a non-classified network, and this isn't the first time we've seen this sloppiness from this administration, but this one kind of takes the cake. It is remarkable. And again, from an administration that says they're going to go after the leakers, what are they going to do in this case?
Democrats, they're underscoring the seriousness. Meanwhile, several Republicans were quick to downplay this leaked group chat, calling it a mistake, while others stopped short of demanding any tangible action be taken against the officials involved.
I think it's inside baseball.
You're not concerned about
they used an encrypted app, it's my understanding. And somebody, a reporter or some third party, was invited to join. I'm sure they'll reassess their protocol and their practices, but I can promise you this, when moms and dads lie down to sleep at night in camp, this isn't on their list. This isn't on their list. Somebody made a mistake, it happens.
First off, we absolutely need to go after the Houthis, and we've been way behind in getting it done, so I'm very glad that the administration is doing that. Very important. I haven't seen the specific information yet, but I'll take a look at it. But, you know, Marco Rubio headed up the Intelligence Committee. He's a sharp guy, so I'm not sure what happened here, but I'll sure take a look and see.
Just finding out about it, but obviously we got to run it to ground and figure out what went on there.
So now we're griping about who's on a text message and who's not. I mean, come on.
Joining us now, White House correspondent for Bloomberg, Skylar Woodhouse. Skylar, is the White House taking this seriously? Because as much as Republicans are trying to downplay what happened here, this is a massive national security breach.
Yesterday, he was very quick to criticize The Atlantic. So I think it's a little too early to tell how seriously the administration is taking this. We obviously heard from the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth saying, that they weren't sending these plans over, this messaging system. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what comes out today, especially if we do hear more from President Trump or even Waltz on what happened and what's going on in terms of how the country is conversing on national security plans.
There is such a deep irony here, and I wonder if you're hearing it when you talk with your sources in the White House about the fact that almost every single person who's on the screen right now, from J.D. Vance to Marco Rubio to Pete Hegseth, had a lot to say when it was Hillary Clinton during the 2016 election. The emails and the private server, we know what was on the private server at this point, but is there anyone who's speaking to the irony here, the fact that they had a lot to say about the cavalier nature of information being kept and yet they themselves are on a Signal chat?
That was the first thing that popped into my mind was what happened to former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. I think we all knew that was a very publicized issue over the emails and the private server. And to sort of see, a different form of what happened back then to now is really eye-opening. And obviously, Republicans are they're running Washington essentially. So it'll be really interesting to see how they, react to what we are seeing from this story and over this Signal chain. So it's pretty eye-opening, and I think, it's things will start, I think, rolling out, days, weeks on what the response is going to be.
Yeah, because we did hear from some members of the House Intel Committee. Jim Himes was there, but then also from Brian Fitzpatrick on another network saying that there's going to be a probe from the Intelligence Committee. So that's going to be something to watch. But even before they get started on that, you've got the National Intelligence Director, Tulsi Gabbard, and the CIA Director, John Ratcliffe, both of whom were in this chat, testifying before the Senate for something that was previously scheduled. What's that going to look like?
Oh, it's going to be interesting. That's going to be quite the day to be up on the Hill, if you ask me. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of questions they're asked and if they're, hit with those tough questions on both sides of the aisle, particularly for Republicans. This is a moment for, I guess, Republicans to sort of, call out what happened, and it's going to be interesting to see if they align with the administration or if they, ask questions in an unbiased way that's not maybe in line with the Republican messaging.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely something to look for. And we know that the president is watching how this is going to play on television, as he is always.
Absolutely.
Skylar Woodhouse, thank you. We are going to have Jeffrey Goldberg actually coming up. The Trump administration is invoking what's called state secrets privilege and refusing to provide any more information to the judge overseeing the Alien Enemies Act deportations case. U.S. District Court Judge James Boasberg had given the government until today to provide more information on deportation flights that could have violated his court order from last week. Instead, the Department of Justice has filed documents that read in part, further intrusions on the executive branch would present dangerous and wholly unwarranted separation of powers harms with respect to diplomatic and national security concerns that the court lacks competence to address. Also yesterday, an appeals court panel heard arguments in the government's effort to lift Judge Boasberg's order halting the deportation flights. The hearing lasted about 2 hours. Lawyers for the Justice Department argued each individual migrant should have submitted a case against the flights. But the ACLU said deportations were so swift, there was no chance to file separate claims. The appeals panel was made up of 3 judges. 2 were appointed by Republicans, 1 by a Democrat. One judge vigorously questioned the DOJ on the timeline of the events, openly criticizing the government's treatment of the migrants.
There were plane loads of people. There were no procedures in place to notify people. Nazis got better treatment under the Alien Enemy Act than has happened here, where the proclamation required the promulgation of regulations, and they had hearing boards before people were removed. And yet here there's nothing in there about hearing boards, there's no regulations, and nothing was adopted by the agency officials that were administering this. People weren't given notice, they weren't told where they were going. District Court here hasn't called into question the constitutionality of the Alien Enemies Act. It's been upheld, as you said, as a part of the war power. So that's not the question here. The question is whether the implementation of this proclamation without any process to determine whether people qualify under it. I mean, if the government says we don't have to give process for that, then y'all could have picked me up on Saturday and thrown me on a plane, thinking I'm a member of Trinidad and giving me no chance to protest it and say somehow it's a violation of presidential war powers for me to say, excuse me, no, I'm not. I'd like a hearing.
I'm Ali Vitali. U.S. and Russian officials wrapped up negotiations in Saudi Arabia yesterday, where talks focused on a ceasefire proposal between Russia and Ukraine in the Black Sea. Reuters cites a White House source as saying progress was made yesterday and that a positive announcement is expected soon. The talks in Riyadh are part of an effort that the White House hopes will lead to a broader peace negotiation. The Associated Press points out that another part of discussions yesterday focused on what's actually covered as a part of the ongoing partial ceasefire. While the White House has said the limited ceasefire applies to energy and infrastructure, Russia says the limited agreement applies more narrowly to just energy infrastructure. Joining us now, national security correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, Nancy Youssef. Nancy, Russia wants a prolonged negotiation process here, demanding that Ukraine stop hitting certain targets, while they themselves are clearly not in alignment with the White House on whether it's energy and infrastructure or specifically energy infrastructure. It's an important delineation, but I think one that probably tells us more about Russia's posture in these negotiations than anything. What are your sources saying about where things stand and where it might go?
Well, what's interesting is what Russia is seeking in these negotiations. The Ukrainians and Russia agree to talk about shipping and infrastructure, but after that, the differences appear at this point to be irreconcilable in that Russia is seeking that Ukraine no longer seek NATO membership, that they don't lose the territory that they have, that they so they're holding on to a lot of the things that they sought in 2021. Yeah. And meanwhile, Ukraine is saying we can't agree to any of that. We're not going to give up territory, and we need security guarantees. And so we're at this impasse where the Russians appear to be willing to talk, but not negotiate, because they haven't made any major concessions in some ways since 2021, from before the invasion.
But it strikes me that when you talk about NATO membership now being off the table, the conversation about where territory lines will be drawn, this is all stuff that Pete Hegseth himself actually took off the table weeks ago. Is this now the thing that people were afraid of, that the U.S. has sort of given away the store before negotiations even truly began?
Well, I think, yes, and I think more broadly than that is that what this lays out is potentially a months-long process to work out these sorts of details. The Trump administration came in promising a quick negotiation, but what I think we've seen this week is that this will be a prolonged process because the parties are so far apart, because Russia is seeking sort of piecemeal deals on infrastructure, on shipping, rather than a broad negotiation, and moreover that they're seeking things like sanctions relief as part of this. There's no indication that both sides are moving towards a ceasefire agreement, but rather small many steps, if you will, on the path to a ceasefire. And so it's not just that the U.S. sort of said that some of these things were off the table, but that you have to have them on the table to reach a ceasefire. So to get there, it's going to be a prolonged process, not the quick turnaround that I think the Trump administration was hoping for.
Yeah, and then I want to turn to another conflict that the administration is focused on, and that is in the Middle East between Israel and Gaza. We've seen Israel continue to step up its strikes. They struck a hospital on Sunday night. Talk about where that conflict stands and if there is any sign of renewed progress towards another ceasefire. The last one was so tenuous and now ultimately has fallen apart.
Well, here's the connective thread between Russia and Ukraine and Gaza. Again, the Trump administration promised a quick negotiation. And again, these sides are saying we're not there, that this is going to be a protracted process, that they are not looking for a quick negotiation. While the U.S. can have a hearing at the table, what we're seeing from both of these conflicts is that they can't force those to come to a deal if they don't want one yet. And so, like Russia and Ukraine, what we're seeing in Gaza is both sides deciding that this is not the time for a deal. And there's not an indication now that we're getting closer to it. While the talks are going on, like in Russia and Ukraine, both sides are indicating that they're not ready to sort of deal with the really core issues that would lead to a protracted and enduring ceasefire.
Yeah, Nancy Youssef, as always, thank you for joining us. And still ahead.
Business news, I read that 23andMe just filed for bankruptcy. Yeah, the company said that they were 50% sad, 37% disappointed, and 13% Scottish. Yeah, it's the worst news to hit the DNA testing business since Maury was canceled. That's a good joke. Great joke.
That story does actually have a business connection, which is good because it's time now for business with CNBC's Juliana Tattlebaum live with us from London. Juliana, we'll get to 23andMe in just a second, but first, we saw a huge rise in the markets yesterday. What do you think we can now expect from Wall Street today?
We did. We saw a major rally for all three of the major indices stateside yesterday. A lot of that had to do with some better than expected economic surveys. The March PMIs, purchasing manager indices, were a lot better than the market had expected. So this calmed some nerves around a potential slowdown in the U.S., a potential recession even. The Mag 7, the Magnificent 7 tech stocks posted their biggest gain in over 2 months yesterday. Now today, attention shifting to the Conference Board's consumer confidence indicator for March. We're also going to get new home sales for February, and we'll hear from a couple of Fed officials.
And then on top of that, President Trump says he'll soon announce more tariffs on pharmaceuticals and the auto industry. What more can you tell us about that and how those sectors might react?
Well, we actually got a lot of mixed signals from the Trump administration yesterday. Nothing new there. Trump said that he will soon announce tariffs targeting automobiles, pharmaceuticals, and other industries. He said fairly soon, over the next few days, at some point in the not too distant future. But he also said, I may give a lot of countries breaks on reciprocal tariffs, which are set to take effect April 2nd. So in some, we may see some new tariffs, but we also may see some breaks.
And then, Juliana, our colleague, Jimmy Fallon, of course, teed us up on this last story. 23andMe has filed for bankruptcy. What could that mean for millions of people whose DNA is stored with the company? It's a business story and it's a privacy story.
It certainly is, and that clip from Jimmy Fallon was hilarious. I was laughing to myself as I listened from here. But it is no laughing matter, the fact that about 7 million customers, their DNA data is locked up in this company. They've been struggling with recurring revenue for years. They've also faced massive privacy concerns. You might remember back in October 2023, 23andMe faced a big hacking incident. The hackers got access to data that belonged to nearly 7 million customers. The company was at one point valued as much as $6 billion, and as of yesterday's market close, was worth less than $20 million. They would love to sell off some of their assets. That's part of why they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, but it remains to be seen where these assets go and, in turn, where the data goes.
Yeah, exactly. And therein are the privacy concerns. CNBC's Juliana Tattlebaum live with us from London. Thank you, as always, my friend.
Administration is addressing what happened. Apparently an inadvertent phone number made it onto that thread. They're going to track that down and make sure that it doesn't happen again. What you did see, though, I think, was top-level officials doing their job, doing it well, and executing on a plan with precision.
What if there was Democratic lawmakers or Democratic administration officials passing around classified information on an unsecure channel?
So I haven't been watching the news all day because I'm working, but I'm told the administration acknowledged an error, and they're trying to determine how another telephone number got included in that, and they'll figure it out and they'll improve the process.
That was House Speaker Mike Johnson on Capitol Hill yesterday, defending the administration following a new piece in The Atlantic about a leaked military plan. Joining us now, Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania. She currently serves on both the House Appropriations and Foreign Affairs committees. Congresswoman, we'll just start there. What's your reaction to this Signal group chat? Not just the fact that a journalist got added to it, but the fact that top administration officials are sharing war plans and classified information outside of a SCIF and outside of the traditional ways that you would share that information securely.
It's staggering, the level of incompetence, but the level of danger. Imagine classified information being passed in this way, hours before the actual strike. That put military members at risk. And so I'm stunned that the speaker is saying things like, no one was jeopardized, they're doing a good job. Let's have an investigation, immediate investigation to find out what was going on here. How could they so cavalierly be sharing this information? Something that I want to understand better is, how do you get classified information over to a Signal chat? It's very hard. When I have been in classified briefings, you don't leave with any of the paperwork.
You're not even allowed to have your phone usually.
Not allowed to have phones, smartwatches, anything. But this is staggering, and we need an investigation. The lack of seriousness of this group, and it was stunning the number of top-level people in this administration who were on there. We thought in the first administration they were incompetent, didn't know what they were doing. It's worse now. They really don't know what they're doing. And really what is so important is the fighter pilots, the military personnel who were put in direct jeopardy.
Well, I also think the other piece of this is, will there be a probe? We've heard, of course, from Jim Himes on the Intel Committee, some Republicans saying that they want answers here, but will it be enough? And do you think, in conversations that you've had privately with your Republican counterparts, that even if the Speaker is out there being, I would say, cavalier about this, just calling it an error or a mistake, do you think that there is an appetite within the rank and file to actually just ask some questions about how this could have happened?
I know there's appetite and a demand from the Democrats that there be a full, thorough investigation of what went on and what other signal chats have happened. Who else has been listening in, and what have they gotten? Malign actors. What if Iran or Russia or China, anyone was listening in? I hope the Republicans, every single one of them, right up to the Speaker of the House, says, you're absolutely right, we need an investigation. Our other problem, though, is take a look at who should be doing the investigation. FBI, DOJ, how compromised they are, how loyal and the fealty that they show for this president. I'm very concerned about our Attorney General. Instead of going after Tesla terrorism, as she's calling it, they're crimes, they're important to investigate. What is she going to do about this investigation, about top-level people? They must be held to account for sharing classified information that could have put our military in grave danger, could have cost them their lives.
What can Democrats do to actually force this issue, though? Because we've talked a lot about the constraints of being in the minority. It relies on the fact that there is bipartisan good faith in wanting an investigation, in pressing things like violations of the Espionage Act, like violations of the Presidential Records Act, which clearly, if there are disappearing text messages, that would be in violation of that. What can Democrats actually do to press this?
I'll tell you what, we have to be noisy and bold and call it out. But I'll also tell you, my constituents want to make sure this is investigated. I have a lot of constituents who have members in the military, family members in the military. They are appalled and outraged. So I'll tell you, Congress, the courts, and my constituents and constituents across this country are going to demand the truth about this. I sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee.
Yeah.
You know the number of times we have had hearing after hearing demanding transparency on other issues.
Well, I remember conversations about a certain server.
That's correct.
That come to mind.
Think of that over and over again. So this is staggering. There aren't really good enough words, but what we do know is that the people on that call need to be held to account. How is it the chief of staff let that go on? We thought she was coming in with great competence, the ability to direct people and to rein them in when they didn't understand what they were doing. You know, we were concerned with Pete Hegseth as the nominee for Secretary of Defense. We were concerned that he didn't know what he was doing. It's very clear he doesn't know what he's doing. At the best is to say he's incompetent. At the worst is to say this is malign action by folks within the top levels of this administration. The vice president was on that chain. Think of it. It's staggering. We need answers, transparency, and we need accountability. Somebody needs to get fired, and not just fired and dismissed, fired and understand exactly what went on here.
Who would that person be?
I don't know. That's why we have to investigate.
The other piece of this, too, is you're coming off of being home during a congressional district work period, basically a recess when you're not here in D.C. What were you hearing from your constituents? It was too late for this story to have broken. You were already back in Washington, but a lot of conversation, my understanding, is about DOJ and the cuts there.
Oh, absolutely. My constituents are up in arms. We had a Medicaid roundtable when I was back home last week, talking about the number of people who rely upon Medicaid for investments in their future. I had somebody in recovery there who is 7 months in recovery. Charles, so proud of him because he was getting services through Medicaid. We cut that. 100,000 Pennsylvanians are receiving Medicaid for recovery services, for mental health services. We have a Veterans Roundtable. Veteran suicide is a very serious problem. As you and I were chatting, women vets are committing suicide, or dying by suicide, I should say, at an increased rate. This is serious stuff.
Yeah.
And yet we're going to cut the VA. We're going to cut the emergency hotline training. My constituents are gravely concerned. And the word they use is, I'm afraid, I'm scared.
Yeah.
And so Democrats will hold these folks to account.
A lot of lot of palpable frustration and demands for accountability and
Absolutely.
fear. Congresswoman Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania, thank you, as always, for joining us. But stay around, because earlier in the show, we asked the viewers, why are they awake? We know why you're here.
Yes.
Brian says he's a big rig trucker who's up listening on satellite radio as he crosses Texas for a delivery. Good morning. Eileen is up early, playing host to a group of friends that she has known for more than 50 years. That's amazing.
Wow.
A long-time, lifelong friendship. And Diana is about to take her 87-year-old mom and 85-year-old aunt to the airport so they can live it up at Margaritaville in Florida for a couple of weeks.
Well, good for them.
Good for them.
That's a good reason to be up early.
Can we join you? Coming up next this Welcome back. President Trump held another cabinet meeting yesterday at the White House. Elon Musk was once again in attendance, despite the billionaire not holding a cabinet position. Several secretaries spoke about how Musk's Department of Government Efficiency has impacted their departments, with the president claiming Doge has been finding incredible fraud, though he didn't provide any details. Trump also said the cuts Doge is making may not be popular, but he insisted Americans understand his administration is trying to make the country better.
It is not necessarily a very popular thing to do. You know, you're talking about employment, you're talking about people and the lives of people. And yet, I think the American public understands we're trying to save our country and make our country great again.
Joining us now, White House reporter for the Wall Street Journal, Ken Thomas. Ken, you've talked and reported on the way that Doge is making these cuts, but you've done so with a specific focus on the Social Security Administration. How might that situation go from tough for some people to deal with to now harder because of the Doge cuts?
Yeah, good morning, Allie. I think this is a really interesting area to focus on because the Social Security Administration has seen a number of job cuts. They're reducing their workforce by about 7,000 people. They're going to be closing a lot of field offices around the country. And the question is, do these cuts through Doge start impacting Americans, you know, in their ability to receive a Social Security check every month? You know, we're going to see later today the nominee to lead the agency, Frank Bisignano, appear before the Senate Finance Committee. He's going to get a lot of questions from Democrats on that committee who are very concerned that all of this is really a prelude to try to privatize Social Security in a year or two. That if they can set it up to fail internally, then there will be this need to, quote unquote, fix it by privatizing it.
Yeah, it feels like the hearings done with Linda McMahon, who's now the head of the Department of Education, might be instructive on this, especially if the fear is you're confirming someone whose goal is to basically put themselves out of a job and dismantle the agency that they're being set up to lead, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lack of trust based on what Democrats have seen Doge accomplish in these, you know, first few weeks of the administration. So they're not really willing to give any nominee the benefit of the doubt. And so with Bisignano, he's coming from the private sector. You know, he is the CEO of Fiserv, which is, you know, a payments company, and he's had success, you know, in using technology to overhaul some of the companies he's been involved with. But right now, I just don't think, you know, Democrats really believe that there's, you know, well intentions here, that there's, you know, an attempt to make the system better. They fear that they're trying to make it worse from inside, and then that will lead then to an attempt to privatize later on.
Yeah, certainly no good faith here left between the parties at this early point in the administration. But I wonder if we could zoom out for a second, because Social Security has always had a reputation as the third rail of American politics. You don't touch it, you definitely don't cut it, you definitely don't talk about cutting it. So could the cuts have any potential backlash on lawmakers, Republican or Democrat, or the administration itself, Ken?
Yeah, there's real political risk here for congressional Republicans. You know, if you just look back to 2005, 2006, the second term of George W. Bush, his administration, they wanted to partially privatize Social Security, and it became a big issue in that 2006 midterm elections. Democrats won both chambers in that election. So I think there are congressional Republicans who are concerned privately that they could be, you know, dealing with political dynamite here, and that in the long run, it could be problematic for the party.
And the root of the concern, of course, comes back to Elon Musk. We just had him on the screen there. Is that a key part of this conversation politically, too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Musk is really a driving force right now in the political discussion, and I think there are a lot of Democrats who feel like Musk will really be on the ballot later on this year in some of the off-year elections, and then next year in the midterms.
That's absolutely right. And we'll see one of the first tests of that in just a few weeks during that Wisconsin Supreme Court race, which has become all about Musk and other billionaires dabbling in politics. Ken Thomas, as always, thank you, my friend. And that was way too early for this Tuesday morning. Morning Joe starts right now.
As Democrats, we actually believe in merit. Merit that should be based on what you know, not who you know. And understand, this whole Trump administration is filled with lackeys and incompetent cronies. I'm not talking about any particular individual, though I will note that the Secretary of Defense, who was on that chain, has got to be the most unqualified person ever to lead the Pentagon in American history.